Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is Sunday, February 1st, 2026, and you are listening/watching the Rundown, episode 18, my sometimes weekly podcast where I talk about all things pop culture, mainly focused on video games and anime. Sometimes we dive into movies if it's necessary, but it all depends on what's hot and popping at the time during that week when I talk about certain topics. As always, I'm your host, Corrupt Ronan. And if you enjoyed the show and you want to help support, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, and perhaps comment as well, as engagement does help drive the algorithm for shows like this that you want to help see reach a wider audience. And for those of you that do that, it is very much appreciated. I don't make any money off of this. at least not right now. I don't. So for those who want to, help support in that way, you can definitely do so by liking and subscribing and commenting and all that fun stuff on YouTube. As these episodes do go up on YouTube and are archived there for those who want to continue to watch them or refer back to them for information that they might have missed, whatever it might be. But yeah, it's there. But for today's episode, there's a whole lot of Highguard to talk about because that game came out this week and it was kind of the talk of the town in the video game space when it comes to just the general zeitgeist of what was being discussed on social media and the like. And to be fair, I think it was with good reason. But it won't just be about Highguard. We got news talking about Steam and the $900 million lawsuit they're running through right now with the UK. We'll get into the details about that and whether or not that's actually going to have any merit or go anywhere. We shall see. But without further ado, to not waste your time any further, let's jump right into this Highguard nonsense because it's quite a thing. It pertains to kind of the future of how game development goes from this point on. So I'm going to dub this section Highguard, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the Jeff Keighley. We're just going to start it there, okay? So, Highguard was announced at the Game Awards last year. And it was announced. It wasn't simply announced or revealed at the Game Awards. It was shown as the thing to cap off the show with. In fact, Jeff specifically saved this game for the end of the show, which people tend to have very high expectations for when it comes to what's being revealed because they're usually surprises. And a lot of people will hang around to watch the Game Awards specifically to see what they're going to show at the end of the show. And Jeff hit us with this, and he was very proud of it. He was so proud, in fact, that he would take to Twitter to talk about it. And even took to almost antagonizing people, thinking that they were going to apologize for questioning his decision by the time the game came out. So far, let's just say it didn't quite pan out. It didn't quite pan out the way he thought it would. But anyways, I'll take it over to this screen. We'll let you guys watch this while I get into the details, the nitty gritty over here. Swap it over to that. Boom. Okay, there you go. You guys can enjoy that trailer while I talk about this. So Highguard launched on Monday last week, and the launch actually went quite well. At least according to Steam numbers, in fact. The game had hit over 97,000 players playing simultaneously that day, which is actually pretty good for most games in general. Like a lot of developers would kill to have that many people playing their game at launch, at least on Steam anyways. Obviously, we don't have numbers for consoles and the like because that information is just very difficult to obtain, and accurate numbers are difficult to attain. But Steam's database is pretty public, so you can find those numbers pretty easily on Steam about how well the game is doing on the PC side of things. With that being said, everything was looking up for Highguard, at least in the first day. Then comes Tuesday, the very next day. And the game sees a very, very sharp drop-off in player numbers. We're talking going from 97K down to 10K players, which, in the grand scheme of things, is still pretty good to have in terms of a stabilized number. But when it comes to seeing a kind of drop-off like that, that is an 80 to 90% player drop-off rate, which is insane. A lot of major content creators that are playing the game on day one, many of them bounced off the game immediately, with some even saying that they found the game to be quite boring and just completely stopped playing it on the day of the game's release. Some of the common complaints was that the 3v3 format was a little too small for the size of the maps, that the game was somewhat uninspired and even a little boring and mid. Eventually, this was the 3v3 situation was rectified in a recent update with a limited time mode that they put into the game that features 5v5. And honestly, for a lot of people that are still playing the game, they said this was a night and day difference, and that this new mode should not be a limited mode, but a permanent mode, as it keeps players in the action. Which, you know, if when you have a multiplayer game like this, that's kind of what you want to have, is keeping the players in the action at all times. So I imagine that will change to a permanent thing for the game from this point forward. Other complaints revolved around performance issues, that the game just wasn't running that great on certain rigs, which are a lot of these are issues that they can rectify over time. The problem is whether or not they do it fast enough to get players to come back. And from what I've seen, and part of the reason why I waited until Sunday to do this episode, is that even with this update to fix certain issues, it still hasn't been enough to bring that many players back. In fact, when this update hit, before this update hit, the game was hovering between 8 to 12K players a night after its release. With this update and the weekend, it went from 10 to 15K, which is a nice increase, but I don't think they're ever going to see the numbers they saw at launch again. I think that ship has already sailed. Now, in being fair, 10 to 12K for a studio like Wildlight isn't all that bad, considering that they're not, I wouldn't necessarily call them a AAA studio, as they only have roughly maybe a couple hundred developers, or a couple hundred on staff for the studio itself, which is still pretty good considering a lot of indie studios can't even get that many people working for them. So I wouldn't call them specifically indie, but they're definitely not AAA either, because a lot of AAA studios will sit on thousands of staff at a time. So if the game manages to hover around anything between 10 and 15K, that might still be pretty decent for them, depending on how things go in terms of operating costs. And keep in mind, this thing is free on top of that, free to play. And they're banking on things like skins and microtransactions, stuff like that, to keep the game afloat. The internet reaction in general to Highguard has been kind of a bit of a roller coaster, we'll put it that way. Where there was a lot of people out there that just straight up made a mockery of the game. People that, you know, gave the game an honest shot, didn't care for it. People that mocked the game. And when it comes to the internet, you're always going to have people that mock whatever it is you're putting out there. And a lot of it is, some of it is just for the lulz, just for the laughs. Others, it is for the sole purpose of sending a message. And we'll get into that in a bit here in a second. But the main tenets is that the game has kind of been the running joke over the internet for the past couple of days. And there's been a lot of developers out there that have tried to come out and defend the game and its developers to some degree, saying that a lot of the criticisms of the game so far, and many of them were very harsh, let's put it this way, for people calling the game mid to straight up trash to garbage to wanting to see it fail, the list goes on. But some developers, like those one that works at what's Sven. I keep thinking his name is Steven, but his name is Sven. The CEO at Larian Studios that makes Baldur's Gate. He kind of came out on social media, I was going to go Vancy, to talk about, you know, the criticisms of Highguard and criticisms and harsh criticisms for the industry in total and how that affects developers. Surprising no one, when a developer who makes video games comes out and defends developers from criticism, it's par for the course. But anyways, let me pull what he said here. There's an article I got, and it's interesting because, well, you'll find out why here in a sec. Let me just do that. Let me do a little bit of that, and then come over here. Oh, there it is. There we go. So, Larian CEO Sven Vink sticks his foot in again. Thinks game reviewers should also be reviewed. He's saying that, you know, critics out there being a little too harsh about this whole Highguard situation, even though they kind of got into a bit of shit recently when they talked about using the generative AI at their studio. But in a now deleted tweet that we still have record of because the internet is forever, even if you delete a tweet, if articles pick up on it, it's going to be out there forever. Anyways, he says, sometimes I think it's a good idea for critics to be scored, Metacritic style, based on how others evaluate their criticism. I like to imagine it would encourage a bit more restraint. The harsh words do real damage. You shouldn't have to grow calluses on your soul just because you want to publish something. Of course, he deleted this tweet afterwards because he got a lot of shit for it. In fact, he got shit from Jeff Gerstmann's own Jeff Gerstmann. He says, try a couple of decades of shitty emails ranging from simple insults all the way up to death threats from idiot fanboys who can't handle you giving a game only 8 out of 10 and see which one puts more calluses on your soul, dummy. You'd fold in 6 months or less. It was kind of harsh, but I understand where Jeff's coming from in this case, considering he was the guy who got fired for giving a bad game a bad score. This goes all the way back to when he worked at GameSpot and the Kane and Lynch 2 controversy that came out of that, where he was honest about the game, and he ended up getting fired from his job for it. So I can imagine this hits pretty close to home for him in a lot of ways. In my opinion, I think, to be completely honest with you, the review score thing is, in fact, a stupid idea. And the reason I believe that is because there was a point in time where I wouldn't say reviewers were honest. They most certainly weren't, because there were a lot of developers and publishers out there that would do their best to effectively bribe reviewers to ensure that they would get good scores or good reviews for their games, no matter how bad they actually were. They'd fly them out to certain locations. They would wine and dine them. They'd do everything in their means possible to ensure that they got good scores. The problem with this is that when you give reviewers specific scores and you decide what reviewers should be worth listening to, you create what is called a clique. And one of the problems that the industry has in general right now is very clique-like behavior. Like I said before, it's all one big club and you are not in it. And there's already a tendency for developers to have a list of curated critics and reviewers out there that they deem to be worth listening to. The problem is that while you might think they're picking these reviewers for the sole purpose of their skill and whether or not their reviews are truthful and not too harsh, the reality is a lot of them are picking these reviewers based on their politics. Because you will find a lot of these reviewers are also friends with other critics and reviewers and even publishers in the gaming journalism space. Very buddy-like. Some could call that a distinct conflict of interest when it comes to being honest about reviews. This all comes about in the defense of Highguard because people have pretty much made Highguard the mockery that I wouldn't say it was entirely their fault, but I'll get into why I say it wasn't entirely their fault in just a moment here. But when it comes to reviews, it doesn't matter because a lot of people don't listen to reviewers these days anyways. They tend to listen to their favorite content creator. And most content creators wouldn't call themselves game reviewers. They just make content based on the games they play or just gaming content in general. And sometimes people want to know what their thoughts are on a game, and they'll make quote-unquote reviews that are really just videos talking about said game. And you also have content creators out there whose whole shtick is to make fun of games and then quote-unquote call them reviews. So it really comes down to who people tend to gravitate to and who they find, whose opinions they deem to be worthy. Whether you put a score on it or not is irrelevant. It's not going to save you. Or rather, 8.5 has just got shit for 8 out of 10. I mean, well, I find the decimal point system for reviews in general to be really stupid. And the reason why I find it stupid is because let's say you have a movie or a game that you give a 7.5 to. And then another movie or game comes out and you give that a 7.2. How in God's name are you going to explain a 0.02 difference to justify that? Because people will get mad at that. Now, how do you explain that? What is the difference between movie A and movie B? That's a 0.02 difference. That's where I kind of call the decimal point system to be kind of stupid. Either you give it a solid number or you don't. It's already bad enough to try to explain solid number differences, but trying to explain decimal point differences is even worse. And people have a real tendency to gravitate towards, oh, well, this game got 0.2 better score than this game did. Therefore, this game must be world's best. Like, it's a mess. The whole thing is a mess. And I understand that because at one point I also did a few reviews for games on my channel as well, and people got upset about that shit too. Not even the fact that you called the games bad, but the fact that you just called them average is enough to give you shit for that. You got a lot of fanboys out there that turned games and media in general into not just things they like, but they internalize it as a personality, to the point where if you insult the game or you criticize the game, they take it personal, like you're criticizing them, which is why they get mad. So the big question is whether or not Highguard is doomed to fail. That's the big question in everybody's mind. Is Highguard doomed? Is it a failure? At this point, I would say it's perhaps a little too early to tell. Like I said earlier, we have to keep in mind that Wildlight Entertainment is a much smaller studio than your typical AAA studio, where AAA typically has hundreds to thousands of staff working at a studio, and indies tend to have a couple tens of people working on games at a time, depending on how much money they have and what the budget is. And Wildlight, I believe, has roughly over 100 people working at their studio. So I can imagine they might be able to skate by with a sustained 10 to 15,000 players playing the game at a consistent basis. And it's not like it's not like everybody thinks the game is bad per se. And the issues the game has can definitely be fixed with updates, surveys, feedback, all this stuff. They can have that taken care of on that end of the situation. Like I said, one of the big issues that people had was that the game's 3v3 format was too small for the map size. So they put out the update rather quickly of a new 5v5 mode, which I imagine is going to be the new permanent thing going forward. And the fact that they're such a smaller studio makes them a bit more agile when it comes to addressing feedback when the game has issues and cranking out updates faster. So it does work out for them in the long run. So that's why I'm saying it's a little too early to tell whether or not it's a failure. In terms of where it started and where it is right now, like I said, the game launched, at least on Steam, to roughly 97,000 players, and there was a very sharp drop off. As we can see, we go to the Steam charts. As you can see, all-time peak, looking at 97,000. That bad boy dropped off real fast. As you can see the graph here on Steam, that drop off happened real fast. Launched on the 27th, and Tuesday we were sitting at 10 to 11,000 people, and it has not recovered that since. The recent update that came out on Friday brought some folks back, but as you can see, that number is dropping again. So I highly doubt they're going to get those numbers again. The launch was a case of people wanting to see if the game was worth saving for the Game Awards, especially at the end. So I can understand when people are judging this game harshly. I'll get into why that is. At the very least, though, they can definitely say the improvements helped the game, because when the game did launch, the reviews on Steam at least it was sitting at a mostly negative. It was sitting at roughly 33% when it came to reviews. It's now gone up to 42%, which is now put it at the mixed category of reviews on Steam. And I'm guessing that's mostly due to them addressing some of the issues like performance and the new 5v5 mode, which I'm sure is going to be permanent going forward. Now, another big question is whether or not it is fair to want it to fail. In my opinion, it doesn't matter what the game is, whether it's amazing, a piece of shit, doesn't matter. You're always going to have some people out there that want to see something fail. Whether it's for personal reasons, whether it's for the laughs, the lull, whatever it might be, you are always going to run into that issue of people who want to see something fail. You can't help that. You can't stop that. It is what it is. Now, you do have some folks that do want it to fail for specific reasons. Some of that involves the fact that this game is yet another dot on the graph of developers that clearly do not want to listen to what the general gaming community is looking for, what they like and don't like. It has been very clear over the past couple of years that a lot of the gaming community is pretty much done with hero shooters. You have your Apex, you have your Overwatch, you have your Marvel Rivals, which came out a year ago. And one of the big reasons why that game became so successful is because of the Marvel IP. On top of the fact that they weren't afraid to make attractive characters, which they're still leaning into even now with the recent skins that have come out and a recent update for characters like Emma Frost and Luna Snow. When you see those skins, you kind of get it. Now, one of the I guess the counter arguments to stuff like this is people say, well, it's a free game and it's not that really big. It's not that big of a deal in the first place, and it doesn't really matter what's going to happen on as long as they just address the issues. And people shouldn't be so harsh on the game because it's free. To which my argument is, yes, the game is free, but you know what's not free is a person's time. Time, unlike money, is non-refundable. Meaning once you spend that shit, you can't get that back no matter what. And if there's one big criticism that I have for the industry as a whole is that they have a real bad habit of wasting people's time. Complete disrespect for people's time. And with the industry being as big as it is, with the amount of games that are coming out on a regular basis, means that if they're not playing your game, they're playing someone else's. And there's a lot of competition out there. And there are games out there that people have that are their staple games that they will go back to if they are not playing yours. So you should be going out of your way to ensure that players have a reason to put those games down and to spend their time with yours. Because if they're not playing yours, they're playing someone else's. We only have so much time in a day to spend. A lot of people have jobs, families, all kinds of responsibilities that they have to attend to. And they may have a few hours out of their day to play a video game. And if they're not playing yours, they're playing someone else's. Which is why when a lot of players dropped off with Highguard, as you can see on the graph here, which a lot of players left, chances are high you're not going to get those players back. They're gone. That ship has sailed. But if they can manage to address some of the issues and not only just release skins, but release, we'll call them attractive skins, okay? Because that's got to be the hook. When you release skins, you have to release skins that people want to buy. Cool, attractive, doesn't matter. They got to be skins that gets people's attention. And if you can't do that, because that's kind of what your game is hinging on right now, is a lot of that shit. If you can't pull that off, then yes, your game is destined to fail. It's too early to say whether or not it's a failure. It's going to be a failure right now, although in some people's minds it definitely is. In that regard, the fact that the player numbers dropped off and how they're trying their best to get those players back, they're not going to get them back. They're not going to get them back. You have the players out there that have kind of already made up their minds on it, whether they think it's fun, whether they think it's hot garbage. That's it. It's kind of all you get. First impressions are everything. And if you fuck that up, you're not getting that back. Sorry. Especially in the industry that's constantly moving like the gaming industry as a whole. It's not going to change. So while I believe the game isn't going to die as fast as Concord, I mean, it's managing more player numbers than Concord ever did. But the player numbers are still quite low. And you still have a lot of competition out there that's taking up a lot of people's time, like Arc Raiders, for example, which is a pay-to-play game, by the way. You have to pay to play that game. And I can guarantee you that Arc Raiders, in terms of its player size and player count, at least on Steam anyway, continues to go up. Let's check it out right now. Oh, look at this. It's at the top of the list. Popular today. Arc Raiders is still sitting at roughly 364,000 people playing it. It keeps breaking its 24-hour peak almost every night. Again, that's a paid-to-play game. So in terms of its competition, when it comes to Highguard, it definitely failed to beat them. It's not beating Marvel Rivals, I'll tell you that much. What's Marvel Rivals sitting at? 132,000 players. So we'll see how long they can hold on. Obviously, you don't want to just hover at 15 to 20K forever. You kind of want to see those numbers increase. But we'll see how it goes. I don't think it's going to die as fast as Concord did, but shit, we'll see. We'll see. Do I want it to fail? I was going to flat out say no, but that would be a lie. That would be a lie. There is a part of me that kind of does. And not necessarily due to it being Highguard itself and having a personal problem with Highguard, but I think I am kind of in the same boat of people who believe a lot of games get made for the sole purpose of trying to prove gamers wrong about what they believe the gaming industry wants. And there's a lot of developers out there who don't necessarily want the industry or the gaming community to dictate what it wants, but want to be the ones to dictate what the gamers should want. And there's a lot of games out there that are designed with that philosophy in mind. We're not going to make the game you want to play. We're going to make the game that we think you should want to play. And if you don't play it, then all the labels come out. Racist, bigot, homophobe, Nazi, etc., etc. That's where a lot of the problems are. And a lot of these games get made by those very same people. Keep in mind, there's a lot of people at Wildlife Studios that did in fact work on Concord. So is this Concord 2? Yeah, kind of. When you think about how it was made and like a lot of similarities in terms of its design, because let's be honest here, a lot of these character designs look very generic. I'm gonna put it out there that they made an attempt. They made an attempt with an attractive female character here. Where's she at? They made an attempt with this one, but even then, they still get blown out of the water by the competition. Like out of all the characters in the roster, someone said this is probably their most attractive female character in the game, and that's putting it lightly. So they got that going for them. It doesn't matter how much you want to say that doesn't have an effect when it comes to selling skins in your game based on heroes that you have to make sales on microtransactions. You better lead into that shit if you want to make some money. No one's gonna want to put skins. Well, I was gonna say no one's gonna want to put skins on an ugly character, but some people might if the skin makes them look better. A simple metric of whether or not the characters in your game have appeal is if cosplayers, especially female cosplayers, are willing to cosplay them. If they're not doing that, then you failed somewhere. And I've seen a lot of games come out where I can tell right off rip that no female cosplayer or a cosplayer general is going to want to cosplay these characters at all. Not attractive enough, not cool enough. I have seen more instances of female cosplayers that are willing to cosplay as Brown Dust 2 characters in their skimpiest outfits than I have ever seen of anybody who wanted to cosplay as a character from Concord or even this, which is crazy. That's saying a lot. So now, the other big question. Is Jeff Keighley at fault for this? A little of yes, a little of no, and a lot of yes. Now that I think about it. A little of no and a lot of yes. And I'll explain. It might be confusing. I'll explain. It is not Jeff's fault that the game is... It's kind of mid. I wouldn't call it bad, but it's not blowing the doors off the industry, and it's definitely not, it's not innovating in that sense, and it's not taking the industry by storm. It's not his fault that the game turned out that way. He's not the one who made the game. He didn't have a huge hand in the development of the game. However, he kind of is at fault for the amount of attention that the game got. Keep in mind, this was the big reveal at the end of the Game Awards. Now, when people watch the Game Awards, they have high expectations for the game that's going to get shown at the end. Usually it's some kind of crazy surprise, maybe some rumor that people have heard ahead of time that finally gets revealed at the show. There are a lot of really high expectations when it comes to the final reveal of the show. Vancy's saying the exact same thing I'm about to say right now, in fact. She says, I feel like if it wasn't so heavily publicized by him at the Game Awards, it would have been a little less scrutinized. It would have been, honestly. Like, and not only that, but he made it worse because when people were already calling out, because when the game was showing off at the Game Awards, people had already wrote it off like, what the fuck is this? People were already calling this thing trash when they first saw the trailer. It was a very similar reaction to Concord 2. When Concord was shown off at the Summer Games Fest a couple of years ago, like when that trailer came out, it was the state of play actually. When that trailer came out, people wrote Concord off immediately. Didn't have to play the game. They saw the trailer and said, "Nah, this ain't it." And come to find out, the game came out, and the "Nah, this ain't it" was reflected in the game sales. No one played that shit. When this trailer happened at the end of the Game Awards, people were almost insulted. They said, you made us watch an entire 2-hour show for this? This was your big reveal at the end of the show? You made us sit through this entire show for this. So you already had that working against them. And that was Jeff's fault because he's the one who calls the shots on whether or not the spots that a game gets shown at the show. On top of the fact that there was already plenty of information about how much it costs to get a game trailer shown at the Game Awards in the first place. And Jeff decided that he liked this game so much when he saw it before it was revealed that he decided he would put it in the show for free. It was a very clear indication that even he is out of touch when it comes to what gamers want. And that's kind of the problem with the industry as a whole, is that there's a lot of people here, journalists, developers, the list goes on, of people that are out of touch. And a lot of them are out of touch, not because they just haven't been paying attention. Many of them are out of touch because they want to be the ones to dictate what gamers want and not let gamers dictate what they want themselves. Like I said, they don't want you to be the audience. They want to be the audience. And it's being reflected in the games they make. It doesn't matter how many times we scream at the top of our lungs, hey guys, we're kind of tired of hero shooters. They're going to keep making them. Because there's always somebody in the industry that has this holier than thou idea that because they are developers, they're the ones that know all the ins and outs, and they're the ones that call the shots, and they're the ones that determine what you should and shouldn't like. And then that is then regurgitated by the journalists who say the same things. It is one big club, it is one big circle jerk, and you are not in it. And it doesn't matter how many times the studio gets shut down or people get laid off, because the same people tend to land on their feet at other studios. Like I said, many of the Concord developers now work at this studio. The whole idea of failing up, we call it. Although I don't know if up works in this case, but whatever, we'll see. But then what makes it worse is that Jeff kind of antagonized a little bit, because if I can pull this up, there was a tweet he posted literally on the day of this whole thing going down, and this was on Monday at the launch, and he posted this tweet after the impressions came out about Highguard. Opening X this morning is the scene from Tangle with all the swords and stuff like that crossed on him. You feel like Public Enemy number one, and to be fair, he kind of earned that himself. So Highguard will forever be known as Jeff Keighley's Highguard because of this. He's probably never going to live this down, even though what happened here isn't entirely his fault. He does deserve some of the blame for what happened here. This was something you probably could have showed in the beginning of the show when it came to the Game Awards, or maybe even the middle. But you saved it for the end, the main thing that people watch the Game Awards for. You made this the thing at the end. And to make matters worse, they had the nerves to throw around the pedigree of, oh, this was made by former Apex Legends and Titanfall creators. And the developers themselves also got a little cocky by putting that exact same description on their Steam page, to which they then promptly removed right after the game came out. And I was trying to find it because on Steam charts, you can kind of, on Steam charts, one of the cool things you can do is you can go into the depots and packages section and the update history section to find out when a developer is either going to release an update or has an update planned, or changes they make to the page, or changes to text, icons, pictures, whatever it might be on their Steam page. And somebody found that they had deleted the made by former Apex and Titanfall developers. I was trying to find it here to see if it was actually moved that way. Oh, here we go. So here we go. Right here it says the change that they made. This was on the 26th. It says change store description from the creators of Apex Legends and Titanfall comes Highguard. They removed this. They removed this section from the store page. Now, I don't know whether or not that was because of the backlash they got, or if they were afraid this would contribute to that. I have no idea, but it's hilarious that this happened. And one of the main issues I have with throwing around labels like that is that the studios that make those games is that they're full of thousands of people. And if you had random Joe Schmo at the studio that was working on art assets, maybe he did a little bit of programming, maybe he consulted in some way on some shape or form of the game, but it wasn't a core component of the game, you'll never be able to find that out. Because technically, they did work on those games, but not in a deep capacity that made those games as good as they are. Like a lot of developers will say, "Oh, well, it took the whole studio to make this great game what it is." But the reality is that there's a lot of people in the studio who were really calling the shots that really brought that project together. And it's very easy for developers to throw these labels around simply because they've worked at the studio, but weren't the core of the team that made those games what they are, that made those games as good as they are, that brought the thing together. So that's why I kind of side-eye when developers do stuff like this, because it is not guaranteed that because you worked on those games, your current project is going to be as good or better than those games. You will use this as a means to get eyes on your game instead, because you know if you didn't, no one would care. Riding on the coattails of success that you didn't earn. So this was something they did to themselves on top of that. So I'm like, I don't entirely blame Jeff for this, but he does take some of the blame for it, because you overhyped the game along with the developers. You put a big spotlight and target on them when you did this. So Highguard, is it Concord 2? Kinda. I'm not going to definitively say yes until the game is until they're like, all right, guys, we got to shut it down. But I will say this much. It has lasted longer than Concord so far. If they can manage another week, then they will have outlived Concord. Have I played the game? No, I don't intend to. Like I'm one of those people that is super over hero shooters. Like I never really got into them that much in the first place because I didn't care for the prospect of them. But from the ones that I did play, I had my fun and I am over them. I got a good friend of mine who's still trying to get me to play Marvel Rivals with him, and I might just do that because he's always been a good friend. He's a family childhood friend that I've known since I was fucking 7 years old. So I might just hop into it with him for that, because he's been trying to get me to play it for a while. So if there is a hero shooter I get into and play for a little while, it'll probably be Marvel Rivals for that specific reason alone. But outside of that, I am over hero shooters. I don't care. And based on people's reactions to a lot of the ones that keep getting announced these days, they're over it too. No, that's not me saying I'm never gonna play Apex Legends anymore. That's not me saying that. Calm down, Vancy, calm down. It's not me saying I'm never gonna play Apex Legends anymore. Although for what I've seen, you guys have just completely shot to the moon in terms of skill ceiling on that game compared to me since I haven't played it in so long. Me jumping back into Apex now after this long. You want to talk about the person that would bring the team down, that would hold the team back at this point? That would definitely be me. She says, no, I'm still wood tier. Lies. I've heard the stories about you carrying teams. Get out of here, Vancy. I've heard the stories. You ain't fooling me. I would have to get on a serious Apex grind to catch up. But us even having this discussion kind of proves my point that people have staple games that they go back to, especially in the hero shooter space. So when it comes to making games like that, you really have to set yourself apart from the competition. And you got to have a hook that gets people in, because we do have limited time. And if people aren't willing to spend their time playing your game, they're playing somebody else's. And that is a lesson that I think the industry needs to learn as a whole. The industry, like a lot of developers in the industry kind of want to treat the industry as this one big, like almost like a giant daycare, where everybody gets into it. They all want to be buddy, and everybody come together and hold hands and sing kumbaya. We're all developers. We're all making great games, guys. Let's get into it and make it one big party. This is great. Completely forgetting the fact that this space is also highly competitive. Why? Because, well, you got to fight for people's attention, because there's only so much time some people have in a day. And with the steady decrease of the amount of games that people buy per year, due to things like increased game costs, the decrease in the amount of time they have, people have families, jobs, careers. Like there are a lot, like one the most common these days, especially now, over the past year, the average amount of games that a person buys in a year is like two games in a year. So you got to keep that in mind. The things that lead up to stuff like that happening. Whether it's the price, the time they have, all that stuff could be factored into what's causing this, which means that if they don't have a lot of time to play games. And chances are, if their friends aren't playing it, they're definitely not going to play it. Especially when it comes to multiplayer games. So if you don't respect the player's time, then the players probably shouldn't spend any time playing your game. And that's where my issue is that this industry has a real lack of respect for the player's time. That I have a lot of issues with the industry as a whole, but this is one of the big ones. It's just a lack of respect for the player's time. Not everybody has all the time in the world to play all these games or make time for yours. So if you're not setting yourself apart to make people want to spend their time on you, then why would they? Hard lessons to learn. But we'll see where it goes next week. I mean, if they manage to keep these numbers the same over the course of the week, then the game will probably still survive. They had a whole roadmap they listed out for what they have planned for future updates. And the advantage they have for being as small as they are is that they can crank those updates out pretty quickly. Which I mean, good. Like that's a win in their book. Being able to crank those games out very quickly is a good thing overall. So they can address issues pretty fast. But we'll see we'll see how it plays out for them in the future. Anyways, moving on to our next bit of news here. So, a couple days ago, news dropped that Valve is facing a $900 million lawsuit in the UK. Now, this article says over game sale commissions on Steam. After digging into this, I found out that it's actually more than just game commissions for the reason why this lawsuit came up in the first place. So, as it stands right now, it says the lawsuit hinges on the 30% commission that Valve takes by default on the platform. This coupled with the fact that if you're playing a game through Steam, then any DLC or microtransactions must also be purchased via the Steam store. Locks in users. This is the latest UK cases against closed ecosystem storefronts. There's a pending litigation against both Apple and Google over their mobile market duopoly. So part of this is due to the 30% commission that Steam takes out of games in the first place. But the whole lawsuit itself is centered around the idea that Valve is purporting anti-consumer practices, or not anti-competitor practices, pardon my French. And it is due to things like the 30% commission. But on top of that, after doing a little bit of digging and having to get a summary of this about what's really going on, they also allege that there are platform parity obligations in this lawsuit as well, saying that Valve has platform parity obligations, meaning that Valve forces publishers to agree to not sell their games cheaper or release them earlier on rival platforms like Epic Game Store, GOG, etc., restricting competition and keeping prices artificially high on Steam. To sum that up, basically, if you are releasing a game on another platform, whether it's the Epic Game Store, whether it's GOG, whatever, you cannot release that game at a lower price on those storefronts than what it is on Steam. I looked into this. Apparently, this is a real thing that Valve forces publishers to do. And they enforce it. One of the reasons why the Epic Game Store came to be is because the CEO, Tim Sweeney, believed that Valve was taking too much money out of sales when it came to games. And that one of the reasons why that games are so expensive today is because of that 30% commission that is kind of standardized across the board against many platforms. Like even Xbox and PlayStation kind of have that number, that standardized number of 30% commission. And he believed that part of the reasons why games cost so much is because of that 30% commission factoring into the price. And the lawsuit alleges that 30% commission, the increased cost is getting passed off to the consumer, which is true. When the Epic Game Store came to be, one of the main tenets that Tim Sweeney said was that he wasn't going to do the 30% thing, but instead decrease that to 12% commissions on the Epic Game Store. The problem with that is that the only way for games to be able to take advantage, or for developers and publishers to take advantage of that 12%, is if the game releases specifically on the Epic Game Store and nowhere else. If it releases on Steam, then they have to have price parity. So if the game launches on Steam at, let's say, $70, it can't launch on the Epic Game Store at, let's say, $50. It's got to be $70 there too, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of the Epic Game Store storefront deal to exist in the first place, when they have to keep the game the same price there no matter what. That price still gets passed down to the consumer. But this also comes under the idea, and this is where I also have to call it out, is that it also comes under the premise that publishers would be ones to honor that if they did, and be like, all right, guys, since our game is coming out on the Epic Game Store, and they're taking only a 12% commission, we can lower the price of the game to reflect that. Absolutely not. There's going to be a lot of publishers out there that are going to keep it that way regardless. And that 12% commission just means they take more money home instead. And you'll still have to deal with the exorbitant price no matter what. Like, there's a lot of publishers out there that are just not good faith enough to honor that, no matter what. Now, some might do that. Take Alan Wake 2, for example. Alan Wake 2, in the PC space, that launched only on the Epic Game Store. And because of that, the game launched at a much lower price than most AAA titles did. Of course, the unfortunate part is that the game didn't sell that well, and really hurt Remedy overall when it comes to their finances because over that year, which I kind of understand because Alan Wake in general. I am a personal fan of Alan Wake, but I've always understood that Alan Wake as a franchise never really took off in a big way. Like, it's not that popular. So when they announced they were making an Alan Wake 2, I was kind of surprised because I figured like that first game was kind of all we were getting because nobody else cared about it like that. So that the announcement of a second one took me by surprise. But hearing that the second one also didn't sell that well kind of solidifies the fact that the game and the franchise itself is just not that popular. Even with the game launching solely on the Epic Game Store in this PC space at a lower price, it didn't really change anything that much. But yes, the lawsuit is kind of centered around the accusation that Valve is kind of delving into anti-competitor practices when it comes to stuff like that. And some of it is true. Now, whether it is intentional on Valve's part is kind of the big discussion here. Of course, this lawsuit was filed back in 2024, 2 years ago. And the reason why it's in the news now is because they just got the green light from a tribunal in the UK to move forward with the lawsuit. Now, the question is whether or not this is actually going to go anywhere. Honestly, probably not. And the reason why I say that is because one of the major arguments, especially when it comes to the price parity argument here, what they're accusing them of, is that even with this price parity being a thing, Valve doesn't go out of their way to stop publishers from selling keys or making deals with key seller websites to sell their games at a discounted price. You have legal key seller websites like Green Man Gaming, Fanatical, Game Billet, stuff like that. These are legal key seller websites that have business deals with publishers that will have discounted prices for games before they launch, even on day one, where people can then buy the games on those websites, get a key for them, and then redeem the game on Steam, and not necessarily have to buy the game at its full price on the platform itself. And Valve doesn't stop them from doing that. That all comes down to whether or not the publisher wants to do that, and a lot of them do. Like I bought a lot of games on Green Man Gaming at a discounted price. And at this point, if you play games on PC or you buy games on PC, it is recommended that you have at least one or two key seller websites in your back pocket just in case. You're leaving a lot of money on the table if you don't. So it's not like Valve is specifically stopping workarounds for this issue. They could if they wanted to, but they don't. That's also the case for one wanting to buy DLC as well. Of course, you are still locked into the Steam ecosystem when it comes to this stuff, because once you buy a game on Steam, you have to buy all of its DLC on Steam or make sure that it's functional with the Steam version of the game. This is also true. The 30% commission thing is kind of what they got into an issue with when it came to Tim Sweeney and his lawsuit back then, where he was trying to fight them on this as well. And as you can see, it hasn't gone anywhere because the 30% commission is still a thing. And that's been a thing since 2018. Now, the common joke here is that you'll see in Valve's case is that, Valve gets accused of something and then the thing goes nowhere, and Valve Gabe didn't lift a finger and the whole thing went nowhere. That's kind of the common joke these days. But I imagine when it comes down to it, that Valve has a very prolific legal team under their belt that handles these issues for Gabe and his team. And they don't have to do much. The legal team just takes care of it behind the scenes. And that's it. Because Valve is fighting this lawsuit. They just haven't said anything about it. So I don't know. We'll see where it goes, but it's kind of hilarious that this stuff keeps popping up and people really keep going after Steam. And I can't see the reasons they're going after them is necessarily not legitimate. Like, I'm sure they have a lot of concerns, but it always ends up with Valve not having to do much and they end up winning whatever it is. Now, some people have taken to calling the person behind this lawsuit. I believe her name is Vicky Shotbolt. There we go. What was a hell of a name? Her name is Vicky Shotbolt. But apparently, they accused her of being a fraud, a litigation fraud and activist, meaning that she will go out of her way to create all these lawsuits, hoping that one sticks somewhere that she will win and eventually make money off of. And if that gets brought up, that's severely going to hurt whatever lawsuit this might be. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, there's a whole lot going on here, but I highly doubt it's really going to affect anything. And there was a whole bunch of misinformation out there about this too. People were sitting there saying like, oh my God, Steve might get banned in the UK. Like, Steve's not going to get banned in the UK for this at all, any way, shape, or form, because this lawsuit has nothing to do with any regulatory body in the UK at all. They don't care about this whatsoever. And even worse is that it would be a bad idea to ban Steam in the UK, considering there are millions of people in the UK that use Steam all the fucking time. And to wake up one day and suddenly find out, okay, guys, your account is no longer, you can't have an account here. Your entire game library is gone. Oh my God, that would destroy everything. People would be so fucking pissed. So I've seen a couple of falsehoods popping up on social media about the whole about Valve potentially getting banned in the UK or dumb shit like that. That's not going to happen. That's not, even if they were to lose this lawsuit, that's still not going to happen. Lastly, I'm gonna make a little time to talk about this one here. So there was the news that came out about Ashes of Creation, the MMO Ashes of Creation that's getting shut down. And the reason why this became sort of a big thing is because, well, the game wasn't necessarily complete. It went into early access in December of last year, and it had literally just launched on Steam like a few weeks ago. A few weeks ago. And what was it, just yesterday? Might have been the day before, where they announced that they're shutting down the studio and laying everybody off. And a lot of this came from the fact that a lot of the studio leads, the studio head, I believe, what was his name? Yeah, Steven Sheriff, says that Intrepid's founder and the game creators explained in the statement that the board wrestled control of the company away from him, prompting his resignation. It says, however, a subsequent investigation determined that Sheriff might have been the sole member of the board, which is something to keep in mind entirely. But he went to Discord and kind of answered a bunch of questions about him not agreeing with some of the ethics of what the board was advising, which then prompted him to resign, and then him resigning led to a bunch of other lead members in the studio resigning as well, and they pretty much had no one leading the direction of the game from that point going forward. And when that happened, that's when the announcement of the shutdown of the studio itself came down the pipe as well in an email to the employees and the layoffs and stuff like that. But what's crazy about this is that it wasn't but a couple days ago, a handful of days ago, I think it was on the 26th of January, where the studio put out a statement to the community, talking about how they wanted to fix the issues the game had. Because the game had a lot of problems that people have been talking about to the moon to the developers about to get fixed. And they felt like they were being ignored because a lot of those issues had gone on for weeks without getting fixed. So the developers put out a letter saying, like, okay, hey guys, we have a big update planned for the 6th of February to address a lot of these issues in the game. Stay tuned. Only for the next day to be like, oh, well, so much for that. The studio shut down, everyone's getting laid off, and that's kind of the end of the game. Like, just the crazy turnaround that happened here for this. It was insane. There was a whole, like, they listed the whole thing about the refund. And what I found to be interesting about the refund is that it says here that many have predicted that class action lawsuits will surface, especially given the suspicious timing of the Ashes of the Creation shutdown. The game's Kickstarter always stated that if the game didn't launch on Steam, full refunds to all backers would be issued. Even though it was only live on Steam for mere weeks, that clause was effectively fulfilled. So a lot of the Kickstarter backers probably are going to get refunded for that, especially in regards to Steam, because the game technically did still launch on Steam, even though it was shut down. But for people that did buy the game, I think it was like $50. You could buy the game on Steam. $50. You could probably get some refunds for that. But there are people that have backed the game spending upwards of $200 to $400 to back this game. And a lot of those people are not going to get that money back. Not unless Kickstarter obligates them to do so. That's what happened, because a lot of people right now are feeling like this whole thing was a scam. And when you kind of break down the details of it, it sure as hell feels like one. Another day before situation. Well, not necessarily, because there was still a game there. And for what I can understand, the people that did play it, they saw the game's potential. And a lot of them were comparing it to WoW, saying like if they can work out the issues this game has, it might be able to surpass WoW. Well, it's never going to get that time of day because now it's shutting down, right? But I imagine there was a lot of people on the team that got kind of winded or blindsided by this because they had no idea this was coming down the pipe until all the leadership just left. Just when you thought studio layoffs had seen their end in 2026, come to find out this is only the beginning. The layoffs will continue for reasons that vary across the board. But this one was a case of the studio itself just not addressing the issues and apparently some disagreements happening at the top. And that's kind of where this is going down. So, yeah, that's unfortunate. It's one of those situations where I do kind of feel bad for the people on the team because a lot of them just didn't see this coming. People that poured their heart and soul into this thing for years. Like, I'm pretty sure this thing was announced back in 2016. At least that's when the Kickstarter happened, I believe. But when it comes to making MMOs these days, like, it's not that it's a hugely competitive space, although there are a lot of MMOs out there, but a lot of them really do fail. And I think it really, like, especially now in 2026, it is very difficult to launch a new MMO. There have been so many that shut down over the past decade. They just don't pan out. They're either dead. A lot of them that are either dead or soon will be. Where games like WoW and Guild Wars 2 and stuff like that are still thriving in that aspect because those games, they keep cranking out updates, and people just have a game that they go back to all the time. And sometimes they don't want to leave that game to go play a different one. An MMO is a huge time investment, a huge time sink, and when you spend that much time on that game, you have an attachment to it. And trying to get people away from that is a tall order. And that could be why it's so difficult to launch new MMOs now compared to what it was back in the early 2000s. And to be fair, like even back then, like MMOs in general were still relatively new. I mean, you had games like EverQuest and Final Fantasy 11 and stuff like that back then that took off. But they haven't been able to replicate that since. With that said, I think that's all I got for now. That's all I got for now. I tried to squeeze this last one in there. The new said the new WoW killer will be Chrono Odyssey. Oh, so I don't know about that one. I'm also concerned about that one. That one might not make it either. Like you look at what happened, and the crazy thing is that a lot of these games that shut down have also had some kind of association with like Amazon games. You look at New World. That got shut down. What was it, Blue Protocol? That got shut down and then rebooted again. And no one's really talking about the new rebooted Blue Protocol these days. Although some people are still playing it. You had Lost Ark, which hasn't shut down, but no one's talking about it anymore. Blizzard tried to do a new MMO besides WoW. It was called Project Titan. That got killed before it ever happened. You had WildStar, and boy, there was a lot of games out there that tried to be the new big MMO and just didn't quite it just didn't quite pan out. What was it? Crimson Desert was going to be an MMO until they decided, nah, we're just going to make it a single player game, which in my opinion, I think was the right way to go. Because I can't see Pearl Abyss out here managing two MMOs at the same time. Nah. Dude, I'm so excited for Crimson Desert. It is disgusting how excited it is disgusting how excited I am for Crimson Desert. I should not be this excited about a game, but I am. It is disgusting how excited I am about Crimson Desert. Should have made it co-op. Which one? Crimson Desert? Doesn't that game have an online co-op? It doesn't? They said it would have online features. What? But you have you can play as multiple characters in it though, or is that just part of the story? Wow. Wow. Well, it should have co-op. I'd play that with some folks if it did. I'd have Geo come in and just bully him the whole time. Geo, carry me through this. I don't want to play right now. Fall for the Pearl Abyss trap. You pre-ordered it? I should probably do that. I should probably because they force you to. I'm probably not going to pre-order, but I do want to play it when it comes out. That's one of those big games that this year that I do want to play. Oh, but I haven't played BDO in forever. I don't. It's a mouse game. Jesus. Yeah, we talked about Lowguard. We did talk about Lowguard. We talked extensively about Lowguard. In fact, I would probably have to go back to the first hour of the podcast. We talked extensively about Lowguard. You get a cool mount skin for BDO. I haven't played BDO in so long. I think the last time I played it was like with my ex, I think. And that's because she really got into the horse training shit. She really got into that. We're talking getting into it to the point where she would leave the PC on at night and just let the horse do the auto run to train the horse. She really got into that shit. I said, not anymore, but I used to do it when I cared. Man, that shit was wild. I'm just like, we're just gonna leave the PC on and do this, huh? you just want to train these horses and sell them. It was crazy. But yeah, she really got into that. That shit was hilarious. Yeah, whereas the puppy, I mentioned, like, people call this whole Ashes of Creation thing as a scam, and I mean, it definitely reads that way, all things considered. Like, I don't know for sure if it was in fact a scam, but when you get into the details, it sure as hell feels like one. It's another day before situation. Oh man, if the developers of Star Citizen were to cut and run, it would be the biggest scam in video game history. If that it would shake the industry to its core. If that happened with Star Citizen, oh man. Because that game is like billions of dollars in development costs at this point. They have so much money. And if that were to implode, oh my God. But I'm getting super derailed here. Chat, stop it, chat. Stop derailing me. How dare you? Not gonna, not, I got a show to end, damn it. How dare you? Coming here talking about your Star Citizen and your ashes of creation, even though I'm the one who started that subject. Even though I'm the one that started that, still blame you for it, Chad. It's your fault. But yeah, if you want to hear the Highguard stuff, you got to go back to the beginning of the show. I talked extensively about that. The good, I called it the good, the bad, the ugly, and the Jeff Keighley is what I called that segment. That Highguard is that thing that Jeff is never going to live down. Even though it technically wasn't his fault. Technically, but a lot of the blame could be placed on him for what happened when it comes to that game. Because he overhyped it. He overhyped it, and he doubled down on overhyping it on top of that. Like, it wasn't his fault that the game was mid and kind of boring. It's not his fault because he didn't make the game. But he was the kind of person, he not only did he put it at the end of the show, he did it for free. Where most developers had to pay to have their games shown at the show if they wanted to be shown. He did this one for free. Perception-wise, it's his fault. I mean, in a lot of ways, it still kind of is. Like, just flat out. Flat out. And I think, I didn't talk about this in the earlier segment, but I'll say it here towards the end of the show. I am not the biggest fan of publishers and developers holding events where they invite journalists, content creators out and then wine and dine them to see their games before anybody else does. I think that is a very real problem in the industry as a whole. And I think it should stop. Because at that point, you're making it very clear that even if you didn't buy them off, technically, from an obvious standpoint, it is very obvious that you did this with the sole intent of trying to get some sort of favorable review out of them. Because the sure as hell isn't about getting appropriate feedback for your game to make a better game. Because if you did that, if you wanted that, you would have made it public to a lot more people to get more impressions and more opinions about the game. This was done for the sole purpose of favoritism. And they got that with the slot that they got at the Game Awards. Which ultimately backfired because high expectations are always high for the final game that gets shown at the Game Awards. And this was their final game. And to make matters worse is that when they do fly these people out to wine and dine them, it is always the same people that evoke the opinions that they want them to have. You would think the idea is to get a wide array of opinions and thoughts on a game. But the reality is that the people they tend to bring in, it's not about their opinions, it's about their politics. Because as you'll know, a lot of the people that get invited to these events, they all believe the same thing. They all fly under the same banner. Said it 1,000 times before, and I'll say it again. It's all one big club, and you're not in it. The industry has insulated itself from real feedback because they decided to make everything political. And until that happens, as the saying goes, until that happens, the beatings will continue until morale improves. On that colorful note, I should probably get out of here. So thank you guys. Thank you guys for watching. If you want more details about what I think about Highguard and how this whole thing came to be, you got to go back to the beginning of the episode, like the first 20 minutes of the podcast. You'll probably find it there. I talked extensively about it. Talked about the Steam lawsuit and whether or not that's going to go anywhere and the importance of that, and then touched a bit on the Ashes of Creation nonsense that's been going on too. check that out. Thank you all for watching, guys. Archive will be up on YouTube for those who want to check it out. I'll have to edit out the obviously the pre-show stuff. Wasn't a whole lot of that. Just got to prep work stuff like that going on. But I'll edit that down so you can watch the whole thing. If I can find a way to get time codes on the for this episode up properly too, I'll have to do that. But it might take a bit longer because I still got to trim out some segments and stuff like that in the editing process. But it'll all be up there. So. So that wasn't late. Thanks for the podcast. No, I appreciate you guys stopping by. Even if you did show up like hours late. Jesus. Way to go, viewers. Are you for real? Are you for real right now, YouTube? You gonna buffer me because I was trash talking the viewers? Excuse me? Excuse me? Whatever. Social media links are in the banners below, so be sure to check those out. And if you want to help support the show and you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment if you enjoyed the show. Like I said, I don't get paid for doing any of this. I do this all for free. I'm monetized on Twitch. I'm not monetized on YouTube. And obviously these episodes go up for free. So if you want to help support, by all means, feel free to do the engagement thing. Like, subscribe, comment. It goes a long way. And if you want to help see the show grow and reach a wider audience, that goes a long way as well. But thank you all for watching, / listening, for those who do that. I will see you guys next week. You all have a wonderful day or night, depending where you are in the world. You all stay classy, stay sharp. Don't do anything that I wouldn't do, and I will see you guys next time. You guys have a good one. Love you all. I am out of here. Deuces. And fade to black.